Good evening and welcome everyone to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. We are here tonight to be able to recap a really rough game today. We had the Bills Bears showdown on November 4th here at home at Buffalo, and just a terrible game, but we'll get into that and a lot of details and what we can look forward to in the future. First, I want to talk a little bit about cover1.net. Go over to the site, give us a shout, be able to take a look at everything that's going on. I know a lot of fans are looking forward now to be able to check out maybe some draft coverage. There's awesome work by Christian and Russell. There's always the amazing film breakdowns by Eric Turner, which some of his work ends up over on the athletic.com as well for Buffalo. We have a lot of great breakdowns from Fernando. We have coverage from other teams, a whole lot of great things going. My favorite thing is the premium member Slack. Love to be able to talk back and forth with fans, especially on games like today, where you have a rough game and want to be able to have an intelligent discussion and be able to figure out, what we're trying to look forward to, what you can salvage from a game like today, and be able to try to figure out, what all is out there and what you can try to be able to look for as a silver lining when you have rough games like it was today. So just something that I want to be able to tell everybody about and be able to invite you over there. $25 get you an invitation as a premium member right into the Slack and everything else we have going on. Some great contests and everything we have. I got a request for tonight. Anybody who's listening here on iTunes, please jump out and give us a review and a rating and a comment. We'd really appreciate it. We're going to be running some contests out of the fans that jump in and give us a return, giving away some jerseys, giving away some swag. So some good stuff coming up here. Jump on in there, give us a review, give us a rating, help us out, and try to spread the word about people who are looking to have an intelligent discussion and some positive outlook for what's been a really rough season. So now let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to go over a little bit of the game today, then we'll jump into the comments. We got Red and Yusuf already in there. We appreciate it. I'll get to some of the questions here in a bit, but I will go over the game a little bit. Obviously, it was just a really weird game. If you step back and look at the box score now, it's actually really odd. It's tough to see these stats and then look at the score and try to make sense of it. We go in, that first quarter is pretty much what we expected. Kind of a tough defensive battle, punting back and forth. It ends 0-0. Everything seems to kind of be going as planned almost. And then all of a sudden, it really just kind of gets out of hand. And one of the ugliest quarters of football that I've ever seen in the second quarter, where, we go in and it was just unbelievable to see, all the turnovers, all the scores, bam, 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 right in a row. I don't know that the turnovers were necessarily directly on Nathan Peterman. I think he had some poor luck in the early ones. I think that the fumble from Kroom was tough. I think the ball that bounced off of Terrell Pryor into the receiver's hands was tough. Just some of the stuff that was there. I think the pass interference that we saw on in my opinion, pass interference on Zay Jones, where he got there early. They said it was within 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. So I understand that bounces up and into Floyd's hands to be able to take it back. Just that combination of bad luck is something we're never going to be able to survive as Bills fans. It's something that our team isn't going to be able to survive those kind of issues and turnovers. We talk all the time about our recipe. Our recipe is going to be a positive turnover differential, a positive penalty differential, and then we're going to be in there being able to make those plays. So up until a late turnover, we were 4-0, but it ended up 4 turnovers to 1. They take 2 of those turnovers directly back for a touchdown and a third one on a short field that gave Jordan Howard an easy touchdown. It just put them in such an easy position. We actually did have a lot of turnovers both ways. So technically we won the turnover or the penalty differential, but we still had 10 for 163 yards. So they had more penalties, but we had more penalty yardage, and both teams had an unacceptable amount of penalties as a total. The weird part that I touched on is just looking at the overall totals. We only gave up 190 yards of offense. They ran the ball 25 times for 64 yards. That's 2.6 yards a carry. We only gave up 126 passing yards, and being able to get to them a handful of times for a little bit of pressure. We held their third down efficiency to 3 out of 11. If you just showed me the yards and the efficiencies, we had 22 first downs. They had 11. We ran 81 plays. They ran 46. they only had 190 total yards. We had 264. They had more penalties than we did. If you just showed me those, I would have assumed that this was a really competitive, tough game and that maybe we pulled the upset. To then take that and to see that it applies to a game that's 41-9 and just, at the glance of it, an absolutely embarrassing beatdown is just so frustrating to see that, our defense continued to play well, tried to hold up as best they could, but we're just put in untenable situations. And then if you give them directly 14 free points, it's impossible. Our offense has shown we're not going to be able to overcome that. I'll go through a little bit more detail on each side of the ball. Again, Nathan Peterman is what he is. I talked a little bit on the premium Slack with some of our friends and on Twitter that today might not have been his worst game, but being able to explain that, hey, 3 out of the 4 turnovers really weren't his fault tells you all you need to know. If we're trying to justify that, oh, well, some of those, out of the 4 turnovers that his offense was responsible for weren't really his fault. And then we're trying to, figure out where that comes and how you're able to justify that, oh, it wasn't as bad as what it looked. It tells you everything you need to know. He is not an NFL caliber quarterback. From everything we've heard, he's a great guy. He's a good teammate. He's a smart, hardworking player. I totally understand why you want a guy like that on your team. It just doesn't translate on the field. I understand he's only had 4 starts. I understand we haven't had a great window, but we've seen enough that he is not an NFL caliber quarterback. I'll get into it a little bit here in the touch on the offseason pieces that when I think he'll be on the roster and when he may not. But for right now, that's where he was today. In the backfield, another incredibly poor rushing effort from LaShawn McCoy. I will say on my tracking, 8 out of his 10 carries were not his fault. He did have guys in his face, bringing pressure absolutely immediately, and was, had no opportunity. He did have 2 where I think he danced around and wasn't able to make much of it. Chris Ivory was his normal self. I think he ran hard, continued to work hard, continued to be decisive. He's not going to get you a ton extra, but he did have some good runs. 7 for 36 is a perfectly fine effort. Nathan Peterman had some hollow stats. I'll get to that Hail Mary run he had at the end of the first half in a moment, but nothing really to be able to be taken from that. In the passing game, again, Kelvin Benjamin is what he is. Had a couple plays where we debated it. Was he not working back to the ball, or was it his fault that Peterman wasn't able to get some of those, or that maybe he could have been there to avoid a tip ball or a pick? It's rough to see, but it wasn't anything special. Really didn't get a lot from Zay Jones today. We had seen some solid progress over the last couple games, but really didn't get to see too much. Very little from Terrell Pryor in his debut. So I know he was limited in the number of plays that he knew. He got 5 targets, brought in 2 of them. I don't fault him for the interception. I mean, it was his fault that it happened, but he's trying to make a play. He's reaching out there trying to catch it. He should have caught the ball when it got on his hands, but then, trying to, catch it on the second effort and he tips it up in the air. That's an unfortunate bounce, not something that I think was his fault. He was trying hard on that. Oddly, there were 7 catches from Logan Thomas. That's, something to keep a lookout for, but, just a rough day overall. The offensive line wasn't horrible. We only gave up 4 sacks, but the lack of run game was on them. There are multiple plays that just got blown up and pushed back directly into their face. Akeem Hicks really, ate the interior alive. There's a couple plays the guys got toasted around the outside. I don't know that anyone had a terribly good game. I know Yusuf and Red in the chat have been going back and forth about Deion Dawkins. I actually agree. I like Deion Dawkins. He is certainly a part of our future. I've always questioned whether he's really a left tackle or maybe a really good right tackle. I'd love if we jumped in and, drafted a high level, elite left tackle kind of player, whether that's a Greg Little, whether that's a Jonah Williams. We'll see as draft time comes together. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it further. But overall, I'd love to see us bring in a premium left tackle kind of prospect and moving it over to the outside. As far as some takeaways on the offense, I also saw some comments there about LaShawn McCoy. I think he's been reasonable in his frustration. He has not had any frustration with the team. It's all been about his performance. I think he's tried to voice that correctly, but I do think there's a little bit of pouting. I do think there has been some, some rough outings. He is a captain. He's supposed to go up there and face the music. And, I get it that this is probably the worst year of his career. And I think Red's right that he probably was looking for a trade and was hoping maybe for a trip back to Philadelphia or to a playoff offense. So he hasn't voiced any of that. I think he's still working hard every day. He's there. I do think he still has a piece of our future that I'll touch on towards the end of the show. But yeah, he certainly hasn't looked great afterwards and with the frustration that he's shown after each game. Nathan Peterman, again, I'll use one example. I think he's a nice kid. I think he works really hard. I think that the team kind of rallies around him and tries to do well for him. The play at the end of the first half shows me the psyche and where he is from what I believe is somewhat of a fragile state, which is totally understandable. He's had a horrific start to a career. He hasn't had any good luck. Every bad bounce or possibility has gone against him. At the end of the first half, we have a shot at a 55-yard field goal. A 55-yard field goal is totally makeable from Stephen Hauschka. McD says, no, we're down 28-0. That's not the kind of stuff we want to do here. We want to give it a shot. Let's take a Hail Mary, try to make something happen. He puts Peterman out there. They run the Hail Mary, and all I can think is that he didn't want to throw an interception, so he pulled it down and ran for 24 cheap yards. There were 8 defenders in the end zone. Even if he jukes a guy or two, there were so many guys coming out that would have completely laid him out and crushed him on, at the 5 or 10 yard line that it wasn't, wouldn't have mattered. So that kind of decision making tells me he's still gun shy and that he just doesn't have it in him to be able to do this long term. So, it is what it is. I understand that. I was excited on the offensive line to see a little bit of playing time for Wyatt Teller. From my view, he got 2 drives. It was something that I'm looking forward to seeing. I'm looking forward to seeing Eric's breakdown from the film. I think he got maybe 10 to 12 plays. I specifically watched the first 2. He held up really well on a bull rush from Akeem Nicks. He then was the point man at the point of attack on a rush that he held his guy and let, I think, Ivory actually get by him for a nice gain. So we've talked about it a lot in the premium chat that it's something that I hope maybe is a Matt Milano kind of timeline. We saw glimmers from Milano early on, but he wasn't getting playing time. We heard good things in practice. Then all of a sudden, week 10 or 11, he started to get some starts. I'd love to see that kind of timeline from Wyatt Teller, being able to go in and get some playing time now, maybe a little bit more playing time next week. Then we have the bye week where he has 2 weeks. Let him get some run with the starters and let him get in there. I think we can debate whether that should be for Vlad Dukas or John Miller. I had thought it was going to be for John Miller. Both drives today that he had were both in for Vlad Dukas. We can only take it at face value and assume that means he's going to come in for Vlad Dukas when he comes in. I think it's hard to take much else away from that. I had assumed he was going to be a right guard to Yusuf's question, but he came in on the left side both times today, so I'm going to take him at their word and assume that's where his opportunity to play is. So I think that's something to watch for. On the offense as a whole, obviously, we saw a little glimmer of hope. Josh Allen had the brace off and had limited practice with throwing on Friday and Saturday. I do not want to see him brought back for the Jets game, regardless of how much I want to see him play against Sam Darnold and the Jets. I do not want to rush him back. I do not want to see him dinged up with any permanent damage. Obviously, we cannot afford for him to have any risk of Tommy John surgery. So I hope we see limited practice all this week. I hope we then see him back full practice after the Jets game, 2 full weeks of full practice. He comes back after the bye week against the Jags, and then we get 6 nice games to evaluate down the stretch to be able to get some more good film on him, see more development, see more evaluation, see if he learned anything in this period to be able to get a little bit more to make better decisions, look for some of those things in the future. And I think that's what we can hope for. But really that's about where my window is from a development standpoint and an opportunity standpoint. I think that obviously Josh Allen is by far number one. then I'm going to say Deion Dawkins is number 2 and someone that I'd like to see him shore up some other things. I think he's playing dinged up. I think he's a little bit injured, but being able to evaluate him and see that he can be that left tackle or at minimum is a strong starter for us. Wyatt Teller is another opportunity to be able to evaluate and see his development. I hope we see him get a shot to start after the bye. Obviously, I think that both John Miller and Dukas have had ups and downs, but they're both obviously below average players. John Miller's contract is up. Vlad Dukas is still under contract next year. I'd love to see that as a backup, but we'll see that a lot of that will depend on what Teller is. And if Teller can be the starter, then maybe we bring in a free agent at the other guard, and then we can move forward together. And then Zay Jones. Zay Jones, again, decent game today, nothing special. Doesn't seem to have a great connection with Nathan Peterman, but was putting some things together with Derek Anderson. We're going to look to see that grow with Josh Allen when he comes back. But those 4 pieces are honestly the only 4 pieces that I can see long term. Both Shady and Chris Ivory are under contract for next year. They are what they are. They are older but still talented running backs. I understand everybody who shows, hey, this offense is better with Chris Ivory. And I get that when you have a poor offensive line, the running back who is decisive and is going to get you the sure 3 or 4 yards always looks better. My hope is that next year, adding 2 or 3 new starting offensive linemen, seeing some development out of Wyatt Teller, adding 2 or 3, solid NFL caliber wide receivers, not being able to get 8 and 9 in the box, and then having Josh Allen develop in his second year, then we're going to need that big play potential from LaShawn McCoy. I'm okay paying him next year. I'd like to draft the future running back as well, maybe spend a 3rd or the extra 4th round pick, from the Chiefs trade from Reggie Ragland. Maybe we use that on a running back. We get him developed. We still have Chris Ivory. So I'm okay that both of them are here. I totally get some of the hindsight that, man, I wish we had have traded LaShawn McCoy and gotten an asset for him, but I still think there's value. And obviously the reason that they didn't trade him was the expectation is we're going to bring him back and he's going to be a piece of this offense in 2019. So he is what he is, and we'll kind of go from there. But that's where I view our possible takeaways and our pieces we can look at in the future on offense. Really, it's bringing back those 2 running backs, but hopefully adding something along the offensive line. Obviously, we talked about Dawkins. We have the potential in Teller. I'd love to see Teller come in because we have Russell Bodine under contract for next year. I'd love to see us spend big on a center. One that I actually had my eye on was Matt Paradis, the center for Denver. He's a really good center. He actually got hurt today, and it sounds like he fractured his fibula. Now, a broken bone is not a big deal long term. Maybe that gives us a little bit of a discount in trying to go after him, but I know Denver's going to try to want to bring him back as well. They have some cap problems, so maybe that gives us an opportunity there. I'd love to see us go spend on a guard, being able to bring somebody in, especially if Teller steps up and we have 2 starters on a rookie contract. That's great. I've talked a lot about Darrell Williams, the right tackle from Carolina. He hurt his knee in the preseason, but has kind of worked his way back. Just the connection with Carolina, them knowing him. He's been on a cheap rookie contract and is young, ready for his first payday at right tackle. Again, Carolina has a lot of big contracts. They're paying Clay and Kuechly and all those guys a lot of money. I think they're going to be hard pressed to be able to match a big offer. So I'd love to see bringing in a bunch of pieces there. And then obviously I want to see one of our 1st or 2nd round picks used on a lineman as well, whether that's a Jonah Williams, whether that's a Greg Little. I can't lie, I don't know a ton of the guard prospects and center prospects yet, but we'll trust Christian and Russell when they get their work done, who those guys are going to be. I've been a big proponent of wanting to trade down. I'd love to have a top 3 pick. Maybe there's a couple quarterbacks that make their way up, and you have maybe Tampa Bay lets Jameis Winston go and they want to trade up for a guy and let Fitz be their kind of backup guy or bridge guy. Obviously, the Giants might part ways with Eli Manning. Maybe Oakland parts with Derek Carr. You obviously could see some moves from Tennessee or from Jacksonville with Bortles. There's just a lot of guys that could be a potential, big piece to be able to move up there. And then that gives us the opportunity to be able to go in and, look for something else to add there. So I think that if we can go in, add 2 or 3 free agent linemen, as well as 1 or 2 drafted linemen, we can remake that line pretty quickly and make a sizable difference. Also, I'd like to see a new offensive line coach. I'm not one for going out and just firing coaches and being able to constantly overhaul there, but we brought in Dable a little bit late this year. We didn't let him bring in any of his guys. If he has a guy he'd like to bring in, we've also seen some guys that we had interest in before that have now been fired. We saw Mark Trestman fired up in the CFL. We saw Mike McCoy fired. Along the offensive line, I'd love to bring in a new line coach, and then I'd love to bring in a new quarterback coach. I don't know that I think it was an interesting experiment to give David Culley an opportunity there, but I'd love to see them bring in McCoy or Mark Trestman or heck, even Hugh Jackson. I think a lot of those guys were, obviously in over their heads as head coaches or offensive coordinators, but as a position coach, I'd love to make them a highly paid position coach that we can come in and have that kind of experience there. The last position that I purposely waited on offense is quarterback. Obviously, everybody heard Sam Bradford got released earlier this year. Sam Bradford is a guy that a lot of us were interested in the offseason. His agent, Tom Condon, is a miracle worker. He somehow got Arizona to give him 2 years and $40 million. So they tried to trade him. No one was going to take on that contract. So they released him. When they released him because of the compensation pick calculations, he actually got them a sixth round pick. So they basically traded him for a 6th round pick by releasing him. Rep is in the chat now. What's going on, Rep? Thanks for jumping in from down under. Being able to go through and have a guy like that available, I understand that, the season's already lost. We're 2-7. We're not going to make a playoff run. That's out the window now. I still think that when you're preaching every day in the locker room, being able to talk about, hey, we need you guys not to give up. We need you to keep working. We need you to make sure that you're not letting this go, and that we're working hard every single day to get back into these games, and you're giving us what you have every day. I think it's important for the front office to show that as well, that, hey, we're not throwing in the towel here. We're trying to get better. We're trying to do what we can. A move like bringing in Sam Bradford could do that. Now, to Yusuf's point in the chat, Sam Bradford has shown to be made of glass. However, 2 years ago, he broke the NFL record for completion percentage, threw for 3,800 yards, 20 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions. I think if he, being on a team like the Cardinals, who are terrible, who couldn't trade him and then just straight out released him, maybe that's the humble pie that he needed to be able to go in and now be that mentor backup, that he can be the short-term fill-in guy, not the long-term guy. Maybe in those short-term stints, a 1 or 2 week fill-in for a starting quarterback like Josh Allen, maybe he can get a little bit more out of that for his career. I don't mind maybe bringing him in. You give him $2 or $3 million this year, and then you offer him $8 or even $10 million as a nicely paid backup next year to be the guy to be able to do that. Now, I'm okay if they don't, but I think it sends a good message. And I think it's just because he's not amazing doesn't mean he's not an upgrade over Nathan Peterman and Derek Anderson. They're both, obviously not going to be NFL caliber quarterbacks. Derek Anderson was not brought in to play. He's brought in to be a mentor. They've shown that we do not have an NFL caliber backup quarterback. So being able to bring in someone like Bradford, I think, opens up that opportunity. And if we can get him cheap, that's great. I know a lot of fans want to bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick this offseason. I have a feeling, him being down in Florida, I think Tampa Bay is going to part ways with Jameis Winston and draft their future quarterback. I'll be shocked if Fitzpatrick is a free agent. If he is, I'll pay him the $8 or $10 million to be a highly paid backup. I'm okay with that. So that's the kind of opportunity I think we're looking for and that we're going to try to bring in. So, again, I don't think Sam Bradford's a miracle cure. I don't think he drastically changes the rest of our season, because I hope that he doesn't play. I hope that Josh Allen plays 6 of the games and we only have next week anyways. But I'm okay with them coming in, and that we need someone to be able to make it okay to cut Nathan Peterman. Fernando and Yusuf are talking about it in the chat. I think a guy of the caliber of Sam Bradford makes it okay to release Nathan Peterman, and that's really what I want. So All right. We'll take any other questions on the offense in the chat as we go, but I'm going to flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Again, it's hard to take away positives from a 41-9 shellacking, but the defense played really well. I mean, there was a couple plays where they were put in no-win situations, and there was a play where I think Jordan Poyer came up and tried to tackle Jordan Howard, who is a 6-foot, 240-pound battering ram. And he did. He got crumpled and knocked over, and he still scored a touchdown. But when you're giving short fields, you're giving up free touchdowns and free points, I think it makes it really hard. The defense stepped up. They did their part. They really allowed them to be able to put good film on tape and be able to show what they're capable of, and be able to really still have positives to take from it. So we'll go kind of line by line. Starting in the defensive line, there was really good run pressure. They didn't get to Trubisky as much as I'd like, although I think there was a lot more pressure than the one sack really showed. It showed one sack for nine yards. The defense got to him a lot more than that. I think the PFF grades are going to show that, and some of the pressures when those kind of stats come out. We were around him and causing some problems. We had 7 tackles for a loss overall, so I think a lot of that really was positive. We kept Mitch Trubisky in check. We kept Tariq Cohen in check. 6 carries for 5 yards, 1 catch for 8 yards. He had 2 nifty punt returns that I think were pretty strong. But overall, they actually did a great job kind of keeping that big weapon in check that they had. But in total, it didn't really matter because they were put in such a no-win situation that it was impossible to be able to do anything. So we'll start at the defensive line, like I said, and they were able to go through there. They were able to kind of keep that in place and, good rotation. I actually saw my first 2 big flash plays from Harrison Phillips this week. Harrison Phillips is someone that we had a lot of really high hopes for. And I think I saw a couple of really nice plays from him on a tackle for loss. And then he, made a big stuff on another play. So someone that I've seen a lot of progress from, and that's exciting to see him continuing to develop. Julian Stanford actually checked in pretty well. There were 2 plays where, especially on the 2 long third down conversions, I don't know that it was necessarily his man per se, but they were going deep over him in the zone. It's plays where someone with the speed and reaction time and size and length of Tremaine Edmonds, he might have been able to make those plays or tip the ball. Julian Stanford is obviously not the athlete that Tremaine Edmonds is in size or speed. But he did well. He got a sack. He had 8 tackles. He I think, played well for a backup linebacker and as much as we were going to be able to ask. Matt Milano was a little bit quiet, made a couple plays in the passing game, 2 big tackles for a loss, but not big on the tackling front. The same idea, Lorenzo Alexander, I think, had some pressures, was moving around a lot, but didn't officially register a statistic. So from a linebacker standpoint, not the best game that we've had. I think that a lot of the run stops were from the defensive line. Again, another nice game from Jordan Phillips, although not from a statistical standpoint. He was causing a lot of pressure, blowing things up in the backfield. Really happy with him. Would love to get him back. I'll talk about that as we get into the offseason pieces. And then the secondary. I thought the secondary did all right. I think we gave up a couple of big plays that were backbreakers. We had a chance to get off the field on a couple of their scoring drives that – you can't give up those 3rd and long conversions. Phillip Gaines got picked on immensely. Phillip Gaines is someone that should not be starting for a good defense. He is by far the weakest link on our starting offense. He's under contract for next year. I think he's someone that I'm okay if he's still on the team. I don't want to see him as a contributing starter. I don't want to see him as someone we're depending on. If he's our 4th corner as the backup in case something happens or someone gets dinged up, I'm okay with him being on the roster, but that's for sure the number 1 upgrade opportunity on defense. Going into the offseason and how we want to look at that. From the defensive line, it's really just going to be questions about, does Kyle Williams want to come back? do we want to bring back Jordan Phillips, and what contract does he think he deserves? Those are the two biggest questions from a defensive standpoint. Being able to, we still have Jerry Hughes under contract. I'd actually like to see us extend him. I think with our opportunity to be able to bring in, that 8-man rotation, no starter playing more than 60% of snaps, everybody playing more than 30% of snaps. I think we can get 2 more good years out of Jerry Hughes, maybe 3 at 31, 32, and 33. I'd like to extend him at a reasonable deal. And I'd assume that he'd be happy to stay. I think he's gotten a nice career here in Buffalo. And if we pay him a respectable amount, that maybe $6 to $8 million at 32 and 33, I think that's a very solid deal. I'd like to bring him back. Obviously, Kyle Williams is welcome on my football team as long as he wants. I will pay that man forever. He's still making some flash plays. I would hope that he is, understanding that his role is going to shift, and maybe he's more 30 to 40% of the high leverage snaps, third downs, red zone, getting him in there, but maybe he's not playing all of the first and second downs at the 30 and 40 yard line, and part of a rotation. But if he wants to come back, he's welcome back. We have Eddie Yarborough's rights again next year. We have Trent Murphy under contract. I'd like to get him back healthy. Hopefully an offseason with our training staff could get him back right, get him back on the field, and we're able to bring something there. Again, I think well of Star Lotulelei. He does a good job and is the reason we break up a lot of those run plays. He's not going to show a lot in the box score, but he's a good player and someone I'm happy is under contract and going to be there. He's a positive influence in the locker room as well. So along the defensive line, we do have some age with Jerry Hughes and Kyle Williams, so I'm okay if we make a draft pick there. I'd prefer that it's not one of our premium picks. I'd like to see that as a depth pick, 3rd or 4th round at the very highest, but 4th or 5th, 6th round more likely, and just hope to bring in some depth there, some young players who can develop, who may not even make the roster. I actually count Lorenzo Alexander in the future basically as a defensive lineman. I think that he's still someone that I'd like to see on the roster as long as he wants to play again. I think he's played at a high level. If we can bring him back, I'm very comfortable with that, and someone that I want to be able to be able to kind of connect with what we're doing and, what the defense is trying to show. And someone who I think has been a positive mentor in the locker room. So if he wants to come back, I welcome him back. Going to take my first drink break going solo tonight. And hopefully that's something that we can work in more so basically as a pass rush specialist than as a linebacker per se. Obviously, our young core in the linebacking is huge to our future. Matt Milano has shown the ability to be a playmaking modern linebacker. You can see his safety play from college show all the time. He's a huge part of our future, and I love Tremaine Edmonds. Still only 20 years old, learning so much. And I think that although he has gotten burned on some play action, some run fakes, getting caught with his eyes in a couple of different places from a pass coverage standpoint, those two are a huge part of our future and something I'm very happy about. I do think that third linebacker, again, my thought process of counting Lorenzo Alexander as a mentor in the linebacker room, but not really being a linebacker on the field anymore, I do think that's one spot we can upgrade. So whether that's a mid-round athletic linebacker who can develop and play a little bit, whether that's a free agent addition who can play outside linebacker and cover, I think we need more depth. I think that Julian Stanford's done okay. Deion Lacey should not be playing NFL linebacker. So I think that's an area that we need to have further depth and a starting caliber guy who can step in and allow Alexander to step into that pass rushing role. Derek chimes in that Matt Milano in the 5th round. I don't know that we can count on every linebacker being drafted in the 5th round as a that caliber of player, but sure, if we can hit on another one of those, or at least take a swing at another one of those, and if we're able to take a swing at that and get someone who's at least playing time caliber, I'm good with that. So I don't know that we'll get Milano level again, but that's the kind of swing that I'd like to see them take. And then I think Julian Stanford's under contract for next year. I think he's shown himself to be a reasonable backup linebacker and a good special teams player. I'm good with him being back on the roster again next year, and I think is reasonable to look for as well. So now moving into the secondary, which for the most part has been the strength of our defense and our team as a whole. Obviously, Tre'Davious White is excellent. I think he has shown still to be the shutdown corner that we hoped he would be. He's given up very little yardage. Depending on what stat you look at on PFF, he may be a step ahead or a step behind last year. He hasn't done as well from a grade standpoint, but he's actually doing better in the number of catches he gives up per route, the number of yards he gives up per route. So I think he's now turning into that kind of shutdown corner that people don't even test and don't even come after. And then when he has, he's held some really strong receivers to really poor games. So I think it's something that we can feel really comfortable about. One of Eric's favorite, Taron Johnson. Taron Johnson is someone that I can't lie. I mean, I'm pretty connected in the NFL. I'm a fanatic about watching games, watching some of the breakdowns, reading the mock drafts. When they called Taron Johnson's name on draft day, I had never heard that name before in my entire life. I was asking, who the heck is this guy? What are they doing? This small school, guy that doesn't have amazing measurables. But they knew what they were doing. This team knows how to draft. This front office and coaching staff know how to scout and draft secondary players. He has been a godsend at nickel corner. He is great in coverage. He constantly sticks his nose in there, loves to come up and be able to make a big hit. He's someone, matter of fact, to his detriment. He's actually dinged up his shoulder a couple times trying to make too big of a hit. If he can stay healthy, I think we have our nickel cornerback, for the long term and somebody we can really depend on. I touched on the fact that number 2 corner is actually my biggest need from a defensive standpoint, even more than the defensive line depth or the outside linebacker or the linebacking crew. Cornerback 2 is really, really rough. I think that we absolutely have to have a upgrade there. I'm fine with that being one of our bigger spending elements on free agency. I think that, again, as I touched on, the front office and coaching staff have shown the ability to draft at that level. So I trust them if that's where they want to go. That's one of the areas that I'd think if we trade down in the first round, that's usually going to be picking up an extra second-round pick and probably a future pick. I'd love to use those 2 second-round picks, maybe one on a wide receiver, one on a corner. I think that's a nice window from what I've read in Russell and Christian's work, that the wide receiver market is really not really top heavy. There's not a Julio Jones or AJ Green guy, but there's some really good depth from that 25th to 40th pick. So I'd love to see us take one there, and then corner as well. So I'm fine if we take a big swing and bring in a guy from a secondary standpoint. I've heard some rumblings that maybe Washington will cut Josh Norman. There's some connection there in Carolina. Maybe get him later in the career, and then maybe you also draft a guy to develop behind there. To Derek's point, that would allow us to move on from Phillip Gaines. I'm okay if Gaines is our 4th corner and only in spot duty, dime work, and the special teams. But if we can upgrade there with a signing as a starter and then a draft pick later, I'm good if he's gone altogether as well. So, it's something that I'm okay if they move on from there. The safeties are actually pretty strong. So Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, both under contract next year, in good shape, both young, still in their late 20s. Neither of them are 30 yet. Raphael Bush has acquitted himself well as a backup also. He's under contract next year as well. So I think having those guys there have really shown a lot. We haven't seen a lot from Siran Neal. He's shown okay from a blitzing standpoint. He's going to be someone that we're just going to have to see just a full offseason in an NFL set up with learning more, the offseason program, understanding defense, understanding communication. That they talk a lot about the biggest jump for players is from their first year to their second year. It's something that's there and that we can look at. So again, I'm okay if they bring in another rookie there, but I have a feeling that some undrafted free agents, late round picks, is probably going to be about it from the safety standpoint. We're probably going to go into next year with Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Raphael Bush, and Siran Neal. That's probably our 4 safeties, unless something surprising happens. Mike made an interesting comment. Aaron loves Greedy Williams as well. If we stay put, I always support best available. I'm just so desperate for investment on the offensive side of the ball that my prime situation is that we have a some quarterbacks come up, some teams that are greedy and want to come up and get them, and then we go through and are able to trade down, pick up additional assets, and then are able to pick the offensive player where it makes sense, best available in the middle of the round, and then go through and add more talent later on. If we do stay put, there's a lot of really intriguing talent that's there. Being able to add a Greedy Williams and Ed Oliver, Nick Bosa, players like that are primetime, franchise level players. I'm never going to be upset that we add one of those. If you tell me you have Tre'Davious White and Greedy Williams for the next, 10 years, that's awesome and is not going to be a problem. So, I really want the investment to come on the offensive side of the ball, but I get it that if this just happens to be a defensive heavy draft, that's what we're going to add, and that's where the investment's going to be, then it is what it is. I'm going to chime in real quick here. I know Nick has been venting some frustration in the chat over Daboll. I'm going to touch on this a little at the end of the show, but I'll speak specifically to him here. I agree that he has not shown a lot that makes you sure that, this is the guy that's going to change everything. However, to many of the points that others have made, specifically Rep and some of the other guys, I don't think we can judge what he's done because of how poor the offensive talent is. I think he has had some good schemes. I think he has had some good play calls that our quarterbacks, the backup quarterbacks, and then our poor receivers just can't execute. I think he has shown creativity. I think he has shown aggression. I'm okay with what he's done to this point. And at minimum, I'm okay with giving him next year with the offensive investments to then see what he's capable of. So I'm not here saying I'm a Brian Daboll, supporter, or that I'm sure that he's our guy. What I am saying is I don't think we know that he's not the guy at this point. So I do think that I'm confident he is going to be back. I don't think that he's done anything that's going to get him fired. And I think that letting us be able to invest in this team going forward and bring in offensive skill players, reset the offensive line, and then see in Josh Allen's second year his development, that's going to tell us if Brian Daboll is our guy or not. So I think he's shown enough to be able to potentially do that, and is someone that we're going to watch going forward. So I think that it's something that we'll see where that comes together. I know OG, I know you're making comments on that. That was them playing the Raiders way more than anything else. The Raiders have completely given up on their team and are not part of that. So looking at the overall picture and what we're looking at, I will chime in a little bit on the special teams. Stephen Hauschka is great. He's under contract next year. He's a sure thing from just about anywhere on the field. We have a good kicker. That's great. Reed Ferguson's a good holder. We're good there. I actually like Corey Bojorquez a lot. You guys listen to me every week. He's been really good from a rookie standpoint. We have his rights for the next 4 years. That's awesome. I think Colton Schmidt is just a placeholder. I'm confident that we're probably going to see a competition probably between those two there next year. But I anticipate Corey Bojorquez being our starting punter and someone that's going to be there and be able to be the player that we need from a punting standpoint next year and feel comfortable with that, especially on an undrafted free agent rookie contract. He'll be our exclusive rights free agent the same way that we have some of the other undrafted free agent guys. So like Eddie Yarborough, that kind of thing. So we'll have his rights for a little bit, and then something that I feel confident that he's going to turn out well for us. And we stole him from Belichick, which is always a bonus. So the overall point that I want to bring up for today, and I really appreciate we had this many guys in the chat today after a really rough game. I respect that, and it shows what kind of fans that we have. I think that there's two things. I think that you can be incredibly frustrated with today. I think that you can say that it was wholly unacceptable, at least on the offensive side of the ball, and that this is a kind of performance that's embarrassing to put up at home and that we just absolutely cannot have. Separately, I think you can also say that doesn't terribly change my feelings on the team. That doesn't really change the direction that I think we're going. That doesn't change that I still want to see us invest in this offense and be able to put together a solid offseason and still think we have the right people in place to make this the right thing going forward. So I think you can say both of those things. Today was terrible. Today sucked as a fan. Today was no fun whatsoever, and is frustrating to see the national media give us crap about, such a poor performance. However, I don't think it really changes the direction that we're going, the really good defense that we have, the fact that our team doesn't quit and keeps playing. I thought there were several instances of that. I think you saw them, going for it on fourth down, going for the 2-point conversion, the onside kick, taking timeouts, trying to stay in this game because they keep telling the team that, hey, don't give up, keep working hard. Well, you have to back that up from a coaching standpoint and from a front office standpoint, continuing to add talent, continuing to, make the calls to show that we're not giving up. We're still playing hard and trying to win. So I think when you do that, you send that message that, hey, we're doing that. I don't think you're seeing that right now in the Giants. I think that they're giving up on their coach. You absolutely saw it Thursday night from the Raiders. That's the kind of stuff that shows you might need to bring in a new coaching staff. You might need to be able to do that. But showing the effort that this team shows that I think they have the commitment and the buy-in for the coach and the message that they have. We just don't have the talent to be able to put points up. We had some bad luck today. There were some crappy calls. The refs, I think, boned us a couple times, but that doesn't matter. We were losing this game regardless of a couple of those calls being turned around. Being able to show what we have going, I think you can do both of those things. I think you can be frustrated as a fan and still have hope for the future. You can be mad about today and still happy about tomorrow. You can be mad at the coaches today for their poor performance and not want them to be fired. Both of those things can be true, and I think real fans that are connected and understand what's there will have that mindset to say that today was unacceptable, but that I'm still here for this team and I still like the direction they're going. When they pitched this 5-year rebuild to the Pagulas, Brian, Bean and McDermott told them this is going to be hard. We think we can fix the salary cap in 2 years. They've done that. This is the painful part. We're eating $55 million in dead cap. We think we can invest in good draft picks. They've done that for 2 years in a row. They brought in some good, positive caliber players that are helping this franchise. Tre'Davious White, Matt Milano, Deion Dawkins. Those are good, positive, impactful players. We've seen a lot of glimmers of hope. I think Tremaine Edmonds for sure looks like a good piece. Harrison Phillips, Taron Johnson, those are all guys that are contributing. Wyatt Teller came in for them today. And then being able to go and look, and obviously our hope is that Josh Allen is the real thing. We don't know that yet. He hasn't looked great, but he's shown glimmers of hope. He's shown some silver linings and some positives here. The fact that I think we're going to get 6 more games of him down the stretch is really going to show that. I never am going to root for tanking. I root for the Bills to win every single time I watch them play. To be able to step back in hindsight, I think that it's interesting to be able to see that, hey, they lost, so at least we get better draft pick position. I'm okay with that looking back in hindsight. I'm never going to root for that and, want to lose. So I'm never going to do that. So losing every game that Josh Allen is out is probably better for us in the long run, because now if Josh plays well down the stretch and wins 1 or 2 of those games out of those last 6, maybe 3, I think at home against the Jets, at home against the Dolphins, at home against the Lions are all winnable games. If Josh Allen wins 1 or 2 or 3 of those games, that's great. Then maybe it doesn't throw away our draft pick position. So it looks like we're going to be right there in I'd say top 6 draft pick. Right now we're in the 3rd spot. We'll see where those things go. Next week, the Giants and the 49ers play each other. That's another win for one of those teams. So it looks like Oakland's pretty locked up for the number 1 overall pick. So we'll see where that goes. But they have a rough schedule the rest of the way. And again, like I said, they've given up on their coach. So that's what we've got here for today. I really appreciate everybody in the chat. Having this much activity and interaction is awesome on a rough game like it is today. William, I really appreciate those comments. That's what we do. We try to be reasonable and think long term. I'm not going to be one that's going to throw out a million hot takes. I'm not going to try to say that, hey, we need to fire everybody every single game. That's what got us to this point, continually firing guy after guy, and Gailey and Jerron and Williams and Rex and Doug leaving and everything over and over and over again, and resetting every 2 years. That doesn't get us anywhere. That's what's going to set us back. And then you bring in new guys who now want to find their guys. So sticking with this plan, getting through the ugly part of the dead cap, being able to get us into position to now bring in people that fit, keeping all the same coaches for a third year in a row, keeping the same offensive system for the second year in a row. Now we get the opportunity to be able to build and go forward. So, I touched on the things we can build from an offensive standpoint, as a highlight, a veteran cornerback, a new rookie running back, a lot of investment at the wide receiver and tight end position, a lot of investment at the offensive line, 2 or 3 free agents and a draft pick at each one. On the defense, some depth in the defensive line, a new outside linebacker, a new cornerback too, and really that's about it on defense. I think our special teams is pretty well set, and then it's really just getting into that same offseason and all the investment we have there on the offensive side of the ball to be able to see where we can take that, and then we'll know. I think at the end of next season, we're really going to know. If we start seeing games like this next season and we're 2-7 at this point next season, then I'm open to hearing, hey, maybe these aren't the guys. But the defensive system they put in place, the young talent we have on defense that will all be back next year, the opportunity we have to invest on offense in draft picks and free agent capital, I think that we have a lot to be excited about and reason to be hopeful for the future. It doesn't make today okay. It doesn't make games like this fun because they're not. It sucks to get shellacked like this, but there's reason to be hopeful about the future and to look for opportunities to still have a bright horizon ahead of us. So with that, I'm going to wrap up for the day here. Again, come on over to cover1.net. Be able to talk with us a little bit more, be able to chime in, join as a premium member, $25 get you in with premium content. We do premium mailbag podcast. Me, Nate Geary from WGR, Aaron Quinn, Eric Turner. We do premium mailbags that answer just your questions directly. Go through there. We also do breakdowns looking at different things. We have the premium channel Slack, a lot of really good stuff going on. You can come find me on Twitter. That's at Greg Tompsett, GregTompsett. Love to follow back Bills fans, get into some good chatter online, have a good time on Twitter. Anybody give me a follow. I love to follow you guys back and have a good time there. But thanks again for today. I know this wasn't the game we wanted, but at least hopefully we had some catharsis here, a chance to be reasonable and to vent a little bit after a rough game and to be able to look ahead to the future. And then we'll get together again later on this week, previewing the Jets, and talk again next week. Thanks, guys. Had a great week. Talk to you all later.